I accidentally proposed to my boss's daughter at a wedding while trying to impress my crush. If you've ever had a moment where your brain says, do something smooth, and your body responds with something socially catastrophic, then you're going to understand this way too well. Because I still wake up sometimes and think, yeah, I really did that. It started with a wedding. Not mine. Thank God. My friend's cousin's wedding, actually. I was invited as a plus one by a guy I barely knew, which should have already been my first warning sign that I didn't belong there socially. But I went anyway, because my crush was going. And when I say crush, I mean the kind of crush where you suddenly start believing you're funnier, taller, and more emotionally stable than you actually are. Her name was Lisa. She worked in marketing. She laughed at my jokes once, which I later replayed in my head like it was a marriage proposal. So yes, I was already not thinking clearly. Now here's where things get worse. I also found out 2 days before the wedding that my boss was attending. And not just attending. He was bringing his daughter, who apparently everyone at work had already decided was very important socially. Whatever that meant. All I heard was, don't embarrass yourself, which of course guarantees embarrassment. So the plan I formed in my head was simple. Be normal. Be confident. Be interesting. Do not, under any circumstances, do anything weird. And that was my first mistake. At the wedding, everything was going okay. Too okay. Which is dangerous. I had survived the food line. I had survived small talk. I had even successfully pretended to understand what wine people were talking about. Then Lisa showed up, and my brain stopped working properly. She was standing near the dessert table, and I walked over thinking, just be cool, say something casual, light humor, maybe a compliment, not weird. What I actually said was, so hypothetically, if someone wanted to propose today, like, not saying I will, but like, this venue is kind of set up for it. Silence. Not awkward silence. The kind of silence that feels like people are physically stepping back from you. She laughed politely. Which was worse. Because polite laughter is what people do when they are trying to escape a conversation emotionally. And then my boss walked over. With his daughter. Right at the exact moment, I decided to recover the situation. Which again is where everything collapsed. Because I panicked. And instead of stopping talking, I doubled down. I turned to my boss and said, you know what's funny? I was literally just telling her that I could see myself proposing in a place like this. Pause. Let that sit. Because I didn't stop there. I added, not that I'm planning anything, obviously, unless life happens. That sentence, that exact sentence, is where my dignity left my body. Now here's where it gets physically painful. His daughter, who I had spoken to exactly once before in my life, smiled, tilted her head and said, oh, that's interesting. Who would you propose to? And my brain, instead of saying, no one, wrong wording, ignore me, decided to say, well, I mean someone like you, I guess. Like hypothetically speaking, not specifically you, just your vibe, your personality demographic. I actually said personality demographic. Out loud. At a wedding. The table went quiet. Lisa looked like she wanted to disappear into the cake. My boss blinked slowly like he was trying to confirm he was hearing English. And his daughter just nodded and said, that's very forward of you. At that point, I knew I had two choices. Leave the conversation gracefully. Continue speaking until I somehow dig to Australia. I chose option 2. I said, I'm not saying I'm proposing. I'm just saying hypothetically, if someone misinterpreted this as a proposal, I would understand why, but it's not one. Which is probably the worst sentence ever spoken at a social event in human history. After that, things get blurry. I remember someone changing the subject aggressively. I remember Lisa suddenly needing air. And I remember my boss patting me on the shoulder in a way that felt less like friendliness and more like containment. I left early, not dramatically, just quietly, like a man escaping the scene of a minor social crime. The next Monday at work, nobody mentioned it. Which was worse? Because silence means it was memorable. It means it is now part of company folklore. It means at some point, in some Slack channel I'm not in, someone has definitely written, "Don't bring him to weddings again." Lisa never talked to me the same way after that. My crush did not survive physics. And my boss's daughter now avoids eye contact with me like I'm an unpredictable weather event. But here's the worst part. Sometimes I think about going back in time. Not to change anything. Just to watch myself from a third-person perspective. Because I know I looked confident. I know I sounded normal to myself. But in reality, I was a man actively proposing to multiple people in the same 90-second window without realizing it. And if there's one thing I learned from that day, it's this: never trust your brain at weddings. It will betray you faster than free champagne.
So what did you think of the story? Like, subscribe, and drop a comment below if you've ever felt second-hand embarrassment all in the name of love.